Hi, I'm Lara Bianca Pilcher, an actor who has lived and worked in the arts markets of London, Australia, now the USA. I have also travelled all around the world as a performing artist. Here on this podcast, we have honest conversations about the emotional, physical, mental, and spiritual aspects of the creative industries with professionals who also happen to be believer artists. Join me and my creative tribe as we navigate life in the creative industries. My handsome husband and podcast editor Andrew and I run not-for-profit Artists House International and the Artists House International podcast. Find out more at artistshouseinternational.com.
Coming up
is no matter what you go after, you're probably going to fail sometimes and you're going to run into brick walls and there are going to be hard moments. So why not go after the dream? Go after the one that God's put in your heart. There's going to be problems. You're not going to be like, I'm called to be a filmmaker or a plumber or whatever your passion is. I'm going to be this thing, but instead I'm going to be a scuba diver so that life's easy. When you feel like you have to design and plan and build the bridge from where you are to where you're going, that's a lot of work. And you're probably not as good at building bridges as you think you are. But when you take God's hand and he says, come this way, and you're just like, sweet, where are we going? And you go with him, he'll build the bridge.
Thank you so much for listening. You can now become a Patreon supporter by visiting our website, artistshouseinternational.com, where you can find information, episodes, and a link to our Patreon page where we upload bonus content. We thank you so much for your support, all of which enables us to keep creating episodes. And now enjoy our latest. I am with George A. Johnson, and this episode's called Movies That Move Us, which comes from George A. Johnson, actually. That's kind of like your life work, isn't it, George? And George is a multi-award-winning writer, director, producer, cinematographer, and editor who has created thousands of TV commercials, music videos, web videos, short films, as well as 5 feature-length movies. And I have watched a couple of those, actually, and one of them moved me so much that's why I wanted to talk to George, because I was like, here is a filmmaker creating gritty work that moves and actually quite simply freaked me out, but it made me think afterwards for months. That doesn't happen a lot, George. That doesn't happen quite often. We see and we forget, but something in that film stuck with me and still sticks with me. So welcome on that note.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. It's so nice to be here with you.
So good to chat. I've literally been trying to talk to George for ages because I've been in different time zones and traveling, and now I live stateside. That's a new word. That means I live in America, and I'm closer and it's much easier to chat. And I just want to tell the listeners a little bit about you, in that you've now garnered 72 awards. That's a lot.
Yes.
That's a lot. Plus additional 147 selections and nominations from film festivals and awards and competitions in 20 countries. That tells me that you've been at this for a while. Is that right?
It's been a little while, yes. That is true. Since I was 5.
I love that. And I'm gonna definitely ask you about how you started, because I've got little ones now who show interest in filmmaking. It'll be really great to chat about that a little bit later. But for now, I want to start with talking about Thy Neighbor, which is the film that I talked to about before when I said, I'm still thinking about it. And I know you created this, produced this, directed this. Did you write it as well? Thy Neighbor? Yes. You did. It was quite some time ago, but it was really gritty and moving. And I'd like to know, just what did you, as a believer, create something like that? Did you cop it from anybody, or were they really inspired? Was the general feedback really positive?
Oh, you mean, what was the feedback like on it?
Yeah, on Thy Neighbor, when it first played and it went out into people's homes and cinemas and things. Yeah. What was your feedback like? Because it's challenging. It creates some challenging questions, and I do want people to go and watch Thy Neighbor. I think it's really, 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 it poses a question as believers of how far do we go to love thy neighbor? And even at the point that when they're dysfunctional, I think it raises really good questions. So tell me a bit about the story of where this film came from. How'd you get this idea, and the process of feedback in terms of creating something so gritty? Yeah.
That's a great question.
Yeah.
Yeah. The feedback, I'll tell you, was actually better than I expected.
Good.
Um, Now, my films up until Thy Neighbor were always more like what you would expect from a Christian film, kind of like a Hallmark type,
Yeah.
family
Yeah.
friendly. Yeah, yeah. And that's how Christian movies are made. So that's how I made my movies.
Mm.
And we made this one called Homeless for the Holidays.
Mm.
And this was back in 2009. And it was great. We went around, we had screenings and film festivals and things, and we found that young kids just loved it.
Mm.
And older people really loved it. And then we did a screening for these teenagers. And halfway through, I looked around the room and like half of them were on their phones. And I'm like,
Oh,
I lost them. But I was
wow.
like, wait, I thought if I just make a movie, everyone will watch it all the way through. What?
Oh, that's
It
hard.
was a learning moment for me. I was like, oh no, I have to somehow find a way to keep their attention. So I started
Mm.
talking to some people, some other leaders in the church. And I was just like, because I had this idea for Thy Neighbor, and I thought, I want to create something that just grabs them by the collar and just doesn't let go.
Yeah.
And I ran it by some people, and like, no, just you don't want to do that. You gotta keep doing the way you've been doing. Build an audience, build a brand, all of that sort of thing. And I just really felt like I wanted to create a Christian movie for
Yeah.
people that don't normally watch or even like Christian movies.
That's so good.
And I just felt like there's a large group of people there that could really benefit from seeing a movie that leads them towards conversations about God, that gets them thinking about
Yeah.
God, that
Yeah.
just won't watch the other movies I make.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wrote this script and I was like, whew, yeah, this will definitely keep people's attention.
Yeah.
But I was scared to death to make it because, people are like, when are you making Homeless for the Holidays too?
Yeah.
That's what's coming next from you. And so I was just terrified, I'll tell you. And I've said it before, the process of making that movie was probably scarier than the process of watching that movie, just because
Yeah.
I really feared that the Christian community was going to be like
Oh, yeah.
really disappointed.
Yeah.
Just like, wait, this
Absolutely.
is scary. You can't,
Mhm.
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because there are certain expectations when you watch a Christian movie, you're going to laugh a little, you're going to cry a little, you're going to laugh a little more, and then hopefully you get saved at the end. That's how Christian movies work.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And this just kind of broke every possible rule. And so it was scary. And so I put it on the shelf. And I thought, there's no way. Maybe someday, but I can't make that. So I tried to write another one, which was more of like a puppy love. It was a more Christian movie. It was a cute family movie, which is great. Those are great too. And I just kept running into brick walls. I couldn't get the thing made. And so God kind of brought Thy Neighbor back to mind. And I went through and read the script, and I was like, wow. And then it was about a 10-year process. And every time I'd revisit it, I'd be like, how can I make this guy just a little creepier, just a little,
That's
how
good.
can I mess with this character? And so over the course of 10 years, he grew into a really creepy, horrible person.
Oh my goodness. And that was he was creepy. The casting was brilliant. He was so creepy. Oh my goodness.
Thank you.
My husband's like, yep.
There's a story there too. We had actually cast that role.
Yeah.
And then we had an audition for a couple of the other roles, and this Dave showed up. He drove to Indiana from Wisconsin.
Wow.
And said, I'd really like to audition for The Neighbor. And I said, oh, dude, sorry, we've got that cast. We're good. And he's like, I've driven a long way. Can I please just audition? And so, we're like, let's honor him. He's given us, put all this time and effort into coming. Let's let him, have a few minutes.
Yeah.
He did his audition in character and never broke, and then left. And we were all just sitting there with our mouths hanging open, like, what just happened? Because the original way that it was supposed to be was, we had this Tom Cruise lookalike, this big, hulky, handsome guy. Yeah. And that's how the story was supposed to work.
And it could have gone either way, couldn't it? Yeah.
She was supposed to be dealing with some sort of. It could be a bit
more like attraction and chemistry and all that going on.
Yeah, that's how it was going to be. That was the idea. And I saw this guy, and I couldn't stop thinking about him all week.
Yeah.
And finally, later that week, I just called him and said, dude, you're our neighbor. We got to go this way. And it just gave it a completely different feeling, just this new
so
gritty
good.
creepiness that he brought to it. He was just perfect for it.
Yeah, I'm seriously just in awe, and I love listening to what you say, because I think it raises, for anybody creating anything from a dance piece to anything, it's like, as a believer, don't be afraid to go to the places that are gritty and tell stories that raise real issues, because so often, you're right, we kind of Hallmark things, and I love Hallmark, absolutely love it, and I'll watch it any day of the week, but it's that thing where it's out of fear that we often don't create that work. But yet the Bible, I don't know how we did it, but the Bible is full of gritty stuff, and somehow we've watered it down to be safe. And I know there's probably a long history as to why we've arrived at that, but I think fear stops us actually wanting to use the full range of our creativity, the full range of story, everything in the Bible. I mean, some of the most powerful books I've read are kind of taking Hosea and the prostitute and not being afraid to really, like what actually happened in that story. And I think you get much more gritty, gripping work. Speaking of gritty and gripping, that's not the only piece you've created. More recently, as in now, I think you're in post-production now, you've been you've written, directed and produced Pulled from Darkness, which is a faith-based thriller inspired by a true story of a woman who was sold into trafficking after her husband lost her in a card game. I cannot believe that happened. How did you come across this story? Where did you find this story?
A friend of mine. Right. Well, honestly, a friend of mine was a missionary in Egypt or Russia, in a lot of these areas. Wow. And he knew a lot of the people involved. And he came to me, right after Homeless for the Holidays, probably 2010, 2011.
That's a long time.
So, George, I've got this amazing story.
Wow.
And I was working on another little project called Thy Neighbor at the time. So I was like, I'm sorry, man. Right. So I was like, I can't really work on anything else right now, but, maybe sometime down the road. And he took it to a few other producers over the course of those 7, 8, 9 years. And again, just nothing ended up happening there. And finally, 2.5, maybe 3 years ago now, he contacted me and said, please just come sit down with me and let me tell you this story.
I love how pushy people are with you. I think it's great. There's a lesson in that, listeners. Knock on doors, people.
That's exactly right. So I went and sat down, and he started telling this story. And my wife and I were sitting there, and we're just like, what? I mean, as soon as you find out it was her husband that sold her into trafficking, and it was over a card game. And then, the police didn't do anything about it. And this isn't like in 1835. This was 10 years ago.
Oh, wow.
And it was just, And so we were just stunned by the story. And so we're like, there is definitely a story here. Let's dive into this a little further. So he and I flew to Armenia for a week. And we interviewed the people. So we got to interview all the people involved, the missionaries and the woman herself and one of her kids. And we learned so much more about this story. I wish I could tell you, but there'd be spoilers in the movie.
It's probably all embargoed, isn't it? It's like, nope.
There are moments in this movie where you're going to go, there's no way that really happened. I mean, it's just like when they described it to us, I'm like, this is better than a movie. This is real life stuff. It's just shocking what really happened. Just miraculous stuff. It was, it's a really kind of, it's a hard, gritty story for the first half hour, but then the rest is just this miraculous story of God leading this woman back to her children. You understand? She was in trafficking for 3 years.
Wow.
She had 3 young kids. In the whole 3 years, she was kept in this dark concrete room, and her bathroom was a rusty coffee can. And she was in here with all these other women, and she still to this day doesn't know what any of them look like.
Wow.
Because it was pitch black. They know each other by voice only. So she's in the cell for 3 years. The only time she ever sees light is when the door opens and they need her services. And so she kind of learned, she had never heard about God. before this. So to her, darkness was safe. Darkness was good. And light was bad.
Oh,
Light
wow.
was scary.
Gosh.
So she had, yeah.
Oh.
And so so that's kind of where her head was. And then she finally became injured, and they decided she wasn't useful to them anymore. So they threw her out of a car in the middle of an alley and drove off. And she woke up from a coma in a hospital where she was befriended by this Christian nurse. And this nurse, this was in Amsterdam where this is legal. And so she's seen this stuff over and over and over again.
Wow.
And she just finally said, all right, it's one of those things where, your heart just sort of, you have to, for your own safety, kind of harden your heart.
Yeah.
So all the pain people are in. And she finally cracked the door open and she said, I'm going to help this person. And she just poured into this woman and just invested in her and found out she had these kids. And like, we have to find these kids. So she just joined her kind of in this quest. The kids were no longer at their home in Russia. They had no idea where they were. They were in a different country by now.
Gosh, that's
and
the
when
most
they actually found them,
thing for a mother to be separated. Like,
yes,
it's one thing thinking about, gosh, being used, but the second, as a mum myself, I'm like, that to me is the worst part. It's like, I do what you want to my body, but give me back to my children. Do you know what I mean? Like, in the name
100%.
of being a mother, that's the trauma, the second trauma, the bigger trauma for me. That's heart-wrenching. Yeah.
And when they found the kids, they were still in the same clothes from 3 years ago, from the night. They said they were skinny and starved. They were huddled in the corner of this little abandoned shack. And the missionary who found them said they looked like starved dogs. They were just kind of all huddled up together on the floor and just on the brink of death. But God kept them alive. And, unbelievable series of miracles to not only find them in another country, but then to, it's not easy to just find undocumented kids in a different country and say, hey, ship them over. I promise I'm their mom. There's a lot of red tape you have to go through.
So much red tape.
So they had, just normal people. They had missionaries, they had churches, even the KGB got involved. And it was incredible. I don't want to spoil anything, but there are some really great moments.
I already wanted to watch it, but you've made me want to watch it more, but definitely leave myself a few hours to a day, maybe a week, to just feel things and afterwards and let the emotions just land where they land. I mean, already I'm like, that is on so many levels, so inspiring, so gritty, so incredible, so hopeful, so painful, so it's everything. I mean, wow, just wow. I can't wait to see that. And it's already got, the script has won 4 best screenplay awards, right? And there hasn't even, that's just from reading the script at some of these festivals, which is amazing. It says a lot. Why do you think, 1, we need these movies, and 2, why we love watching movies so much, in your opinion?
Oh man, that's a great question.
Start with the first one. Like, why do you think we need these movies?
I think we need anything that draws our attention to God.
It's good.
And there are so many, the movies that I made in the past that fit the formula, that, the more Hallmark style. Yeah. There's such a great use for those. I always say, anyone who invests their time and talents and fortune into making any sort of Christian movie, hats off to them. I love it. I mean, the whole heart behind it is to reach people. Yeah. And if all the movies were the exact same genre, we could only reach so many.
That's good.
And I feel like my calling has kind of become, at least for now, to make the movies that most people who are sane, like I used to be, are too scared to make. Yeah. There's just, it's, I think there's a huge audience out there that just will not watch what's recognized as a normal Christian movie.
So true.
But they'll watch all this stuff on Netflix and Hulu, and they'll just flip through whatever. And I'm thinking, if I can create a story that's gripping and interesting that can pop up on HBO or Hulu or Netflix or whatever, and you watch it and you get into it because it's a really gripping, powerful story. But by the end, now something's stirring in you.
Yeah.
To me, it's like a kind of like mind and soul medicine. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
you just you put that message out there and allow it to draw people's hearts to God, and then hopefully he can start to do a work and heal them. Everybody's got hurt and problems, and if it can lead somebody, I mean, I've been in low times too where I felt separated from God, and it would just be so wonderful to stumble upon something that leads me back to him. And so if I can create a gift for somebody that does that, that's kind of where my passion is.
That's so good to hear. And, you know, even listening to you as a believer who feels right now in this chapter of my life connected to God, you know, what it did for me was make me want to put down everything I'm doing and go and help kids like that. You know, it's got a call to action just in the story. It makes us sort of think less about our privilege and more about what we can do, doesn't it, to be there for others. And I mean, what you're doing in sharing it through story and through film has that effect, that call to action, without even putting at the end, hey, or maybe you have, I don't know, but like it doesn't need it, is what I'm saying, because I already feel like I should do more, you know.
That's awesome.
And so for some people that might be just giving to, you know, campaigns that are supporting, you know, against human trafficking and things like that. I love it.
By watching the movie, they'll do that. A portion of the proceeds will go towards some trafficking ministries.
I love that because it's so vital, isn't it? And it's too common. Trafficking, it's way too common in so many countries. I think I drove past a lot of, I was driving on the weekend, 8-hour drive, and I drove by a lot of places that looked like trafficking was happening here in the States. I didn't see it, but it's like all those truck stops full of like those sex shops and things all surrounding, and it's such darkness, and you just think, it looks so dark there. And you know that there's sex workers there, and you think that they're probably not all there by choice. It's heartbreaking that it happens right under our nose every day. Yeah, it's horrible, isn't it? And I'm so glad that you're doing that, and hats off to you. Amazing. Yeah, I had another part to that question is, you know, that's why we need the movies, but then why do you think, just generally, like I think people forget this, but we watch, most people, television every day or movies every day. Why do you think people love watching movies and stories every day?
Man, that's the filmmaker's journey right there, is figuring that one out. And I think honestly, I mean, I can pretty much only answer for myself and from my experience and what I've seen, but I think it's just that escape. I think life can be hard, life can be stressful. Now I know that these days the world is at peace and harmony and there are no issues in the world, but sometimes life can be difficult and stressful. And it's just nice to be able to turn something on and visit someone else's world.
That's such a good answer.
Even if it's a dark and gritty world, you get to turn the TV off at the end, and if nothing else, feel a little better about your situation. But it's just nice to be able to go for a ride with someone. And I guess when I create stories, I like to create characters that you might either want to be friends with or be enemies with, but at least spend time with and just kind of go along with them on their journey.
That's such a really good answer on so many levels. You know, I think of what leads me to watch something is normally exhaustion or escape or a need to switch off from doing. And then you get attached to characters and you follow their story. And it's really quite refreshing to do that and inspiring. And it does have an influence, a huge influence in people's lives. I think that's such a great answer. Now I'm going to talk about your story a little bit, because you started, I think you said 5. I know that you had a camera from a garage sale at age 7. I love that, because my son is now 7 And he started shooting movies the other day on an iPad and like full on making them. And I was like, I remember your story. And you can almost, I don't know if you know this word, dislike little children because they are so young and you're like, oh, that's, but for you, it started at 7.
It did.
And I think there's something in that. Can you share a bit about what happened? You couldn't afford the camera.
Right.
Somehow you got one. And then at age 12, you were driven already at age 12.
I was on my way. VHS-C at that point.
Yeah.
No, it was, if your son has an iPod, he's already way ahead of me.
Yeah.
He's doing great.
Everyone's got an iPad these days or
no.
Yeah.
Yes. So there were no editing software, no real computers, I guess, when I was a kid, not for editing video. So, when I was 2, I believe, my mom tells me the stories, and I actually do remember it. We had a chair in our living room, and it was about 8 inches off the floor, and it had just like flaps around the 4 sides. And I would open the flaps and crawl under that chair with my little army guys, and I'd make little stories, make little movies in the under the chair.
Yeah.
And then, like, as I got older, 5, 6, 7, 8, friends would come over to play, and I had all these Star Wars action figures.
Yeah.
And I would always take a blanket, my comforter off my bed, and just sort of throw it in the air and let it land in a heap, and it'd form a mountain with all these tunnels and stuff. And I'd plant bad guys in there, and then I'd just make my guys, go to try to find the treasure or whatever, and they'd have to fight all these guys along the way. My friends would just sit there and watch. I'm like, play. And they're like, no, we just want to watch. And so I'd make little stories with my figures. And then, when I think it was 6 or 7, at a garage sale, I got an 8mm film camera. And I thought I was Steven Spielberg. And I would wind it up. I couldn't afford film, so I never actually shot anything with it.
Oh, wow.
But you could wind them, and when you push the button, they buzz. When you were.
I remember that sound.
It sounded like you were shooting something, and that was enough for me at the time.
Oh, beautiful.
So my brother and my cousin, we'd run around and shoot little movies that would never exist on that camera. And then I got a paper route when I was
12.
Yeah, I think I was 12 when I got the paper out. Saved up for a year.
You did.
You're awesome. Yes. Yeah. And I saved up for about a year, and then I got my first VHS-C camcorder. I wanted a VHS, full-size VHS, because that was like cool technology.
Yeah.
But the VHS-C, they told us, was the newer thing, so we got that. But it was great. And then, man, from then on, it was no holds barred. I was trying to shoot special effects.
I love it.
Shooting little movies, writing scripts, and putting it all together. And I remember I got like the best birthday present ever. My dad got me a tripod for my birthday.
Oh, that is.
And it was like, because it opened up. Now I could have the camera locked, so I could make myself disappear. You could do all sorts of different tricks. So I was just always playing with that camera. And I mean, all the way through high school, that's just all I did was write scripts. I wrote my first feature-length script.
Wow.
When I was mowing the lawn. I just loved mowing the lawn because I could think. I didn't have to do anything but just push the mower and
white noise,
think.
isn't it? Like...
Yeah.
I love white
so I was about 16 when I wrote my first feature. And then, it went from there. I got into the Hollywood Scriptwriting Institute to learn screenwriting. I contacted every studio. I've got rejection letters from Lucasfilm and Universal and all the studios. Please read my screenplay. No.
I get
so
it.
I learned about the Iron Gate of Hollywood.
Yeah.
And so I was 24, maybe, I think, when I finally said, I've knocked on every door. And I'm not getting in. I'd call agents. I'd call like ICM, like the big ones.
Yeah.
I should have called the smaller ones, but I called all the big ones, and like they either wouldn't answer, or one time I actually got through to someone, and I said, "Hey, I've got this great script," because I had no idea what I was doing. This great script, and I'm looking for an agent. And they said, "Oh, okay, hold on for just a minute, please." And like a half hour later, I was like, "I don't think they're coming back."
Oh. Isn't it the worst to hear? Like, they're so rude.
Yes. So I finally said, I don't think it's going to happen, because I'd always decided I wrote these great scripts. And so God was going to send somebody from Hollywood with a big wheelbarrow of cash and dump it in my yard so I could make my movie.
Yeah.
And finally I was like, I think I have to just do it. And
Wow.
so that's what Dreamer became. I had a video camera and
Mm-hmm.
my wife and a couple of friends. One was a nurse and one was a computer guy. And I said, let's make a feature length film. And they're like crazy enough to say, sure, let's
Sure,
do that.
George.
And so, so we made this movie called Dreamer.
Hmm.
And that kind of started it. You know, we had a world premiere at a theater, a local movie theater, and it was this grand theater from like the 1920s, you know,
Love
really
it.
ornate,
Yeah.
and it held like 650 people or something.
Mm.
And we were the first movie in the 79-year history to actually sell out a movie crowd at our world premiere. And so it was this amazing world premiere experience that we had, and then
Mm.
I was just hooked. You know, I
I
worked in
just love
television. I
what you're
worked at a lot of TV
saying.
stations,
Good on you.
but
I'm glad
it
you
was
kept
always,
going. Yeah.
yeah. Oh, boy, lots of reasons to stop. And I don't think I've made a movie yet where at least at some point or two throughout the process, I was like, how did I end up in this career? There's so many easier careers
Yeah,
out there.
exactly. I hear you
It's
on
just,
that one.
but I tell people because people are like, well, I
Mm.
want to go after my dream, but what if I fail? Or what if it's, you know, what if it's hard? What if I can't do it? And the simplest advice I've come up with since then is no matter what you go after, you're
Mm.
probably going to fail sometimes and you're going to run into brick walls and there are going to be hard moments. So why not go after the dream? Go after the one that God's put in your
Good.
heart. There's
Yeah.
going to be problems. You're not going to be like, you know, I'm called to be a filmmaker
Mm.
or a plumber or whatever your passion is. I'm going to be this thing, but instead I'm going to be a scuba diver so
Yeah.
that life's easy.
Yeah.
You
It's
know what I'm saying?
yeah.
Go go after the thing that you're spiritually equipped to do,
Yeah.
even though there's going to be difficult times on the road. You just have to go through it. You're going to have to push no matter what you go into. You're going to have to push through stuff. So go after the right one.
That is such a word in season. And I love what you said because there's so many people that want to do it and they don't know. What the thing that really stands out is that some people quit after all of the rejection that is from the powers that be. But you found
Yeah,
a way. And I quite often
yeah,
say that, you know, when you're called to a career as a creative, because this drive in you that you're like, I have to do
yeah,
it. I can't not do it. You know, and I think about Disney, Walt Disney, and how everybody said no. Do you know you know this, but it's for those who don't, he just went out and did it anyway. He put a, he's remortgaged his house and he did it anyway for the Mickey Mouse cartoon, his first one. He did it anyway with no one believing in him because there was a drive. You don't know, do
yeah,
you? None of us know when we create
yeah,
something that's going to be that thing, but we can't wait for somebody to say, here is your permission. Here, I validate you. You are worthy
yeah,
of whatever
yeah,
ABC. You just do it because it's in you and there's a drive. And I say to people, look, if you're happy doing something else, do it.
yeah,
But if you really have this drive and you feel like I can't do anything else with, and I will take the pain because the joy is so great for me to create, do it. It keeps you going,
yeah.
doesn't it? Like that drive
It
keeps you
does.
going. Um,
And actually, Thy Neighbor was actually my Disney moment. Actually,
oh,
Homeless
wow.
for the Holidays and Thy Neighbor. With Homeless for the Holidays, I had a really good job with a marketing company. I was doing the marketing for a company, and
Yeah.
I lost that job. And so we didn't have anything. And I was depressed and just
Yeah.
laying around
Been
and
there.
no vision, no
Yeah.
direction. Yeah.
Yeah.
And God said, hey, you need to make a movie. This was 2008 when everybody was going through this. He
Wow.
said, you need to make a movie about all this that inspires people to get back up. And I
Mm-hmm.
was like, how in the world would I make a movie? I've got nothing. And
Yeah.
he's like, just write the script. And I wrote the script in 1 month. And up until then, scripts took me about 10 months to a year to
Wow.
write. So I wrote the script and I was like, okay, here it is. Now, do I sell it? He's like, no, go make it. I said, hey, how in the world? I don't,
Yeah.
our
Oh
power
no.
got shut off
Yeah.
for a week there. I mean, I'm like, how? I had to write the script at the library because our power was shut off at the house. So I had to take my laptop to the library to shoot. I was like, I can't make a movie. But then it was just like one of those things where it wasn't like, here's $1 million, go make a movie. It was, here's God, go make a movie.
Yeah.
And so I just would take a step forward and a step forward. I said, okay, well, I need we shot Dreamer on a home video camera.
Yeah.
And there was this new camera that came out called the Red. You've probably heard of it by now.
Yeah.
But the Red was like the big camera, you know. And I was like, I want to shoot my next movie on a Red. And I'm like, oh, but God, I have no money. I don't want to shoot another movie on a home video camera. And literally, like that day or the next day, I get an email from a cinematographer friend I hadn't talked to in like 2 years. He's like, hey, I just got a new camera. I need a creative project. Do you have anything? And I was like, well, what's the camera? He's like, it's a Red. And I was like, huh. I said, well, I have this script. Take a look at it. But I can't afford to pay you anything. He read it. He's like, I love this. He's like, yeah. We'll make it. I'll put together an HD crew and we'll all work for free. And if it makes money somehow on the other end, great. If not, no big deal. This is just going to be a lot of fun. And so we had a crew.
That's
so
the
then
next
we're like,
day.
okay, let's have.
That's nuts. Yeah.
I know. I was completely ill-equipped. I was David, but with no stones.
That's incredible.
And God brought the thing together.
That is so big. Yeah, that's big.
So we went to this local theater and had auditions. And my super optimistic wife was like, I bet about 8 people are going to show up for auditions. We had like almost 1,000 people show up to the auditions from like Connecticut, Vermont, Chicago, New York. They came. Yes, I put one little thing on the internet. I don't know how they all saw it, but it just whoosh, like God just brought them in. So we had access to all this great talent that we would have never imagined.
Wow.
And that's just how God did all the way through. We had like no money to work with. There was one day where it was a really hot day. All the actors were thirsty. We didn't have any water. And we're like, oh man, what are we going to do? This lady pulls up in her car and stops and says to my wife, hey, are you guys shooting that movie? Is this the movie I've been seeing in the newspaper? And my wife says, oh yeah. She's like, is there anything I can do? And she's like, well, would you mind getting us some water? She took off, came back with a trunk full of bottled waters for the crew. Yes. And it was just like that all the way through the process.
Goodness.
And then when we got to Thy Neighbor, it was a similar situation. I had left my job and I just decided I have to do movies. And so we're like, we'd always thought, we were going to move to Indiana for 1 year back in 2000.
Yeah.
So 21 years ago, we were moving here for 1 year.
Wow.
And so I quit my job so I could focus on movies. And we had sold our house. So we're like, hey, okay, this is the time. Do we want to move back to Michigan now?
Yeah.
But we had so many great friends here. We're like, no, let's stay.
Wow.
But we had sold the house. I had no job. And then we're like, it's time to make Thy Neighbor. Let's do this. So we used the money from the house to get the ball rolling and moved into this little tiny, actually Thy Neighbor's house, the neighbor's house. That's where we lived for like 2 years. Turns out it's hard when you start your own company.
For the film. It's the best way. They need to apply for permits. It's like, it's my house.
Yes. So I sold the house and I meant to say too, with Homeless for the Holidays, to get the budget that we did have for it. When I told God I don't have any money, because we needed some money for props and snow and things like that.
Yeah.
And he said, I said, I don't have anything. He said, yeah, you do. I said, no, I don't. I've got nothing. And he's like, look at that computer. You got some stocks. You've got all this. And I was like, oh, I guess I do have things. And so I got on eBay and sold everything to raise just this tiny little bread and fish budget. Yeah. Yes. And so we sold everything, sold our retirement. I'm like, I can't sell my retirement, the stock. Wow. This is our nest egg. This is what we're gonna...
man, because we've just done some radical things for the Lord as well. Keep going. We're just like, yeah.
So we sold that stock, and that was the lion's share of what we used to make the movie. And literally, like 6 months later, the company went defunct, and the stock is now worth like 17 cents. So if we hadn't done it, it would have been gone anyway.
He's so inspiring.
So we had decided this is our stock, this is our future. We're going to save this for when we think we need it. Wow. And God was like, no, this is when you need it. I'll provide for your future when your future gets here. And it was just, it realigned how we think, because we felt like we had to control every aspect of our lives. We realized if you hold God's hand when he says come, he works things out for you. And it's like, when you don't have to control everything, you just go. And he makes the things come together. And it works out so much better. If I had $1 million budget, and I ran out of money and didn't have that water, we would have all been dying of thirst that day. But since I had God instead of $1 million, he said, "Oh, you're thirsty. Let me just bring you a trunk load of waters for everything." He just took care of every problem that we had. Yeah.
I was just
I'd rather have God than $1 million.
I couldn't agree more. Like, I was driving yesterday and I literally raised my hands and I prayed for something radical that I haven't prayed for before, because we can fall into those patterns, can't we? Where we kind of like, well, I won't pray for it because it's too big. And I prayed for something big and literally got a text 30 seconds later with an answer to that prayer, a radical big thing. And I was like, wow. Like, it was just a reminder to ask for those big things. Yes, they're not always going to happen, but there's such a thing as alignment, isn't there? When you pray, and it aligns, and it's like, yes, like, let's do this. I'm just inspired as I listen to your story. I'm inspired on so many levels. My pastor years ago used to say, God lives, you go out on a limb, God lives in trees. Which is such a silly thing to say, but it's like, I'm just what I'm remembering as I listen to you,
That's true. And to that point with your dream, this big dream that you have, it's fun to remember that the God we serve isn't like a shortcut taking God. He's not like, how can I just get around this easily? He likes parting seas and doing big, cool things. And so when he calls you to something, he likes doing the big stuff. We're scared because, like, no, I can't do that. Yeah. But if you're like, wait, I don't have to do that. He's calling me to it. Let's go. You just take his hand and go with him and watch the sea part.
I love that. It's so inspiring for people that are just sitting on the edge of that kind of customers of do I not? As long as you're listening to that stirring in your heart and it's God, it's amazing, isn't it? It's like, let's do this. So exciting. I'm going to finish off with a couple questions for you. Okay. Just some quick kind of, they're not really rapid fire, but they are. Okay. What's one fun fact about you? Can be anything at all.
Wow. Something that I haven't discussed already?
Yeah, probably.
I wanted to be a professional hockey player.
Okay, that was a shock.
And I couldn't skate at 17. I started skating when I was 17. And then I just played like 8 hours a day. I was obsessed. Wow. And by the time I was about 20, I tried out for a professional team. So yeah, that was an obsession here for a while.
That's incredible. We don't really do ice hockey as much in Australia, but my husband grew up doing field hockey, so I kind of have a thing about how amazing hockey is.
Very cool. Very cool.
Well, you've shared some of, but like a summary, just one hard lesson that you've learned that we can learn from.
Get out of your own way. Good. When you feel like you have to design and plan and build the bridge from where you are to where you're going, that's a lot of work. And you're probably not as good at building bridges as you think you are. But when you take God's hand and he says, come this way, and you're just like, sweet, where are we going? And you go with him, he'll build the bridge.
That's good. I like that one. A tip for creative success.
Don't get disappointed and don't stop when the hard days come and when you run right into a brick wall. Oh, wow. Because there are brick walls everywhere. Mm-hmm. Doesn't matter which dream you go after, you're going to smack into a brick wall. So don't think I'm in the wrong place because something hard happened. That's just part of a journey. There's no escalator on the mountain. You have to climb the mountain. So just go.
So good. I think sometimes as we're Christians, we think it can be a very warm, fuzzy environment in some circles that we're in. And then when you actually go in the industry and you start putting your scripts to these people that kind of rule that mountain and you get some rejection, it's like, that's just normal. So please keep going. That's such good advice. Like, you've kept going and you found a way. I love it. One tip for financial income in the arts, like one tiny tip. There's probably millions of different things we can do, like buy stocks. I don't know.
Well, from my experience, have a side job. Because one thing I've discovered, you don't make a movie and get $1 million instantly. To me, I've gotten to the point where you've got to make a living. You have to make a living. But I'm thinking of it more as sending lumber onto heaven. To me, it's almost more of a mission thing.
Yeah.
To where do your art, do your craft, pour everything into it that you can. But then in my case, I also own a corporate production company so that I can be doing things that, put food in my kids' bellies when I'm not. But then, you do that work and then you got your time with your family, you got your time with God, and then be obsessed with your dream too and keep moving that forward. And also every day do something toward your dream.
Good.
Even if it's like one little thing, right? You want to write a script, one day just write the title. That's it. You'll be surprised. You write the title and all of a sudden the next day, I want to do something with this. Whereas a lot of times we get a dream and it's like, it's too big. We see the prize up on the building and the ladder's leaning against the wall. And we want that prize, but I don't want to mess around with this first rung on the ladder. I want the prize.
Yeah, I get
it. And
it.
it's like, you just write the name of the script, take that first step, and then the next step, and the next step, and enjoy those steps as you go. Sometimes we're so desperate for that prize that we just ignore the whole process of getting there. And that's where a lot of the good stuff happens. So don't miss the joys of each step.
Yeah, really good advice. Such a good one. And a word of encouragement, like what's on your heart for creatives right now at this time in history, from George to people listening?
Don't listen to the voices that tell you have to disobey God or ignore God, or because there are a lot of voices in this industry in particular that, well, if you want to be successful, kind of hide your faith in the story or have no faith in the story. Don't be a Christian filmmaker, just be a Christian who makes films. And I see particularly with actors and actresses, you see these Christian people that get into the industry and by the end they feel so chewed up and spit out by this machine that they feel like they've abandoned who they are and they've become something else. And the love, that they were going for just turned out to not be something that was sustainable. And now they're broken at the end of the road. Keep God with you. And if you have to plow a new path, just plow that new path. Be creative, be fun, create stories that are powerful and gripping and gritty. You don't have to stay in the super faith traditional box either. Create something unique, whatever God's giving you. But ignore those voices that say, well, just a little less time with God and a little more time with whatever. You know what I mean? That's
actually so good, because that's just a temptation that I think particularly people pursuing the industry go through all the time. And I look at people like Bieber, who are just so open right now about his faith, and I'm just inspired by these people that are, like Tyler Perry's and these people that are just saying, this is who I am.
Yes, Chris Pratt.
So many. It's just wonderful, isn't it? It's just a wonderful thing to see, and it encourages so many of us. I love that so much.
To your point, you're right. And when you mention those names, they come to mind because they're different. Yeah. If you're a Christian that goes to Hollywood and tries to act and look like everybody else, you just blended into the crowd. But now these people that took their light into the system and kept shining it, their names just came to our mind because they are standing out. So be that light that stands out. And they're
inspiring, aren't they? They're really inspiring people. I love that. And I remember them. In fact, I want to listen to their music or their films more because of it, actually.
For sure, yeah.
Absolutely. We've come to the end of our chat time, but I just want to give you a second to say anything else that you want to say. And also, how can people find you? How can they find you online and watch Pulled from Darkness and these films coming up? Tell everyone how to find George.
Yes. Well, my agent made it super simple. He created a website, georgeajohnson.com.
Great.
So that makes that pretty easy.
We just want to take a moment to thank you so much for listening.
Which is my company.
You can now become a Patreon supporter by visiting our website, artistshouseInternational.com, where you can find information, episodes, and a link to our Patreon page, where we will be uploading bonus content. We thank you so much for your support, all of which enables us to keep creating episodes.
And then
Enjoy
if you're interested
our
in acting or working on crew on some of my projects, if you go to the website, homesickmedia.com, You can sign up for notifications, and then you'll be among the first
Get
notified
email.
when there are auditions. Yeah.
I'm sure people would really love to know about that. The thousands of people that have been showing up. Got to be in it to win it.
Yes.
How it rolls, isn't it? Don't give up.
Yes, for sure.
Thank you so much, George. I have so loved talking to you. I feel so
Artists
inspired.
House International
thank you
is
for
a
letting your
podcast
life be such
capturing
a
the
message
global
and a
voice of
story,
believer
and
artists.
for creating movies
Join
that
us on
move
social
us.
media under Artists House
Thank you so
International.
much, Lara.
We invite you to like and subscribe to our podcast and share it with others so that we can encourage more people. Visit us on our website, artistshouseinternational.com. We encourage you to stay true to your story, keep creating. We love you.